In case you missed it, here's a Sports Animal Rewind.
I'm Vince Ferrara alongside Jesse Smithy here on the New Sentinel Sports page. Let's do our baseball report brought to you by the Tennessee Smokies. Each and every day we talk baseball with you. SmokiesBaseball.com, and the Smokies hitting the road to take on Mobile, the AA affiliate, of course, of the Chicago Cubs. Let's bring in a correspondent from MLB.com, terrific national writer. Richard Justice joins us here on the New Sentinel Sports page. Hey, Richard, Vincent, Jesse, how you doing this morning, Richard?
I'm doing good, and I appreciate you having me.
Always great to talk to you. We appreciate you giving us some time. Let's talk about real quick the Astros with that first pick with Mark Appel. What makes this an interesting and quality pick for the Houston Astros?
You know, what makes it a very cool pick is he lived in Houston until he was 12. He went to games in the Astrodome. He was at the opening of Minute Maid Park in 2000. He wanted to be an Astro. He was probably one. You know, he was. I think a lot of us thought they would take him a year ago after his junior year in Stanford. They had a deal. They did a deal with a shortstop named Carlos Correa and got another pitcher, Lance McCullers, in the mix. And he slid all the way to 8 and turned down $3.8 million from Pittsburgh and decided to go back to school. It was a big decision. His agent, Scott Boras, said, now look, when you turn down this money, people are going to say you're greedy, that you're scared, you don't want to compete, all this stuff. He said, well, look, if going back to school is and getting my degree from Stanford, if that's a bad thing, I can accept that criticism. So basically roll the dice. And lo and behold, he ends up going to his first choice, getting his first choice. He wants to pitch for the Astros. He went on a conditioning program. He's tweaked his mechanics. He's almost big league ready, and he's going to get that 3.8 he turned down. He's going to get about $7.8 million. So what they're going to do is they're going to give him a month or two off. He pitched 100 innings, over 100 innings at Stanford. Bring him back for the end of the minor league season, give him a taste of professional ball, and give him some time off, and bring him back to spring training and see where we're at. I would be surprised if he's not in the major leagues next year.
That's interesting because I heard a lot of speculation saying that Houston needs him ASAP. Maybe in a month's time he could be up in the major leagues already.
No, yeah, you got to really monitor the workload. Now, the one of the things, he pitched a lot of innings in college. He never missed a start at Stanford. He pitched out of the bullpen as a freshman, and then never missed a start the last 3 years. And so, obviously, one of the cool questions you look at is what about work ethic? Sometimes college pitchers are overworked. And they said, in doing our studies of his mechanics, the way the ball comes out of his hands and all that, this is going to be a big-time, durable guy. But the time, he is a huge cornerstone to what they're doing. And it's going to sound crazy. They're going to lose 100 games for the third year in a row. They're not far away from being good. Their farm system's good. They got 3 or 4 pitchers close to the major leagues. And so the bottom line is do not rush him. They're not going to the World Series this year. If they avoid 100 losses, it'll be a surprise. So just have him ready to go next year and see where he's at in his development, see where they are as a franchise, and how many of the young guys are ready, and go from there. There's nothing to be gained by bringing him up. And you know what happens when you bring a young guy like that up? The competitive juices get going, and you worry about fatigue. With young guys, with young pitchers, you just have to be very careful about their development. But I do think they'll be in the big leagues next year.
The player comparison for Mark Appel is Mark Prior, a big guy, a West Coast guy. And you mentioned Mark Appel's mechanics, tweaking those mechanics. Is that to can you draw comparisons between Appel and Prior as far as mechanics, or because look what happened in Mark Prior's career? Is Houston trying to avoid that?
Yeah, of course you're trying to avoid that, but Mark Prior had pretty good mechanics, and the attrition rate on pitching is just through the roof, and that's why every club feels like 2 things about pitching. If you have pitching, you can compete. Tampa Bay has won 92 games a year the last 5 years with the philosophy of we pitch, we catch the ball, and we'll figure the rest of it out. That's the way Oakland went to the postseason a year ago. They pitched great, and they hit home runs. And that's why you have to have so much of it, because Mark Prior breaks down and Kerry Wood breaks down, and you don't get what you hope for. So there is a risk. And I think the way Jeff Luhnow, the Astros general manager, the guy who did all those great Cardinals drafts that has kept them in the running, just said, there's always a risk. There's no guarantees with young players, especially young pitchers. but we feel good about where he's at. I mean, and I think that's why a lot of people thought they might go for a position player, because if you go for Moran, the third baseman from North Carolina, or Bryant, the kid from San Diego, I think you feel very confident he's going to have a long, though those two kids are going to have a long major league career. And with pitchers, you don't know, but I mean, if Mark is healthy, they feel he's going to be a number one starter for a long time.
We're joined by Richard Justice, national baseball writer for MLB.com, a correspondent here on the News Sentinel sports page. Vince Ferrara, Jesse Smithy. Richard, anything else in the first round of the draft, or at least in the first day of the draft with the compensatory rounds in the second, anything surprise you about what went down with that first day of the draft?
No, I think it was the usual pitcher, hitter, high school, college breakdown. One thing, I think there were fewer kids taken from Texas and Georgia. Texas and Georgia has become a huge fertile ground for the draft, and that's a tribute to Chipper Jones and Bobby Cox, and they made baseball cool in Georgia. But there were fewer Georgia kids, fewer Texas kids, and it was a very heavy California draft. Other than that, it's a strange thing. Teams, you could make up a team now of kids, major leaguers under the age of 23. We're seeing this kid, Puig in L.A., and Machado in Baltimore, and Harper and Mike Trout. So guys are going to come fast, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Cubs kid and Miranda, if they're going to be fast tracked. But the Cubs feel about Bryant the way the Astros feel about Appel. We're not there yet. We're not one piece away, and so don't rush it. Let the kid develop naturally. Let him get the best coaching in the world, the best instruction. And when he comes, hopefully he can stay a long time. But it won't be long for him either.
Richard, at the very bottom of the first round, the New York Yankees selected Aaron Judge, a 6'7", 255-pound center fielder. I was trying to think last night when I saw that. I'm trying to draw some type of player comparison for Aaron, because I can't think of a center fielder with that stature.
Yeah, maybe, Dale Murphy was certainly not that big. You know what it reminds me of? It's funny you mention that. I hadn't even thought of that. But when you're in the Yankee Spring Clubhouse, you look around and you go, oh, my God, they have 50 tight ends on this team. I mean, they more and more, size matters. But the Yankees seem to want big pitchers and big hitters in their system. And so I think he fits the prototype. There must be something in their database that says size matters.
Richard, we've heard that 64% of major leaguers came from the college route as opposed to straight from high school or even from other countries. Is that the preferred route, do you think, with general managers, or is it just each team having its own philosophy?
Well, I think in a perfect world, if all the money was equal, you would rather have high school players because you get them faster, you get them better instruction, all that. The problem is that in the first round, the money is so high and the attrition rate on high school players. And, when you look, this is what scouts tell me, like, you look at a 17-year-old kid and an 18-year-old kid, and now you try to project what he'd be at 21, 22, 23. It's ridiculous. You can't do it. So when you get a college guy, he's farther along in his development, his emotional development, and you see more what you're going to get. And if you're going to have to write a check for $4 million or $3 million, you want to do it on a sure thing. The higher upside is with high school guys like the Chipper Jones, but the best scouts are wrong 85% of the time, and the idea is to cut down on it because the money in the early rounds has become so huge you don't want to screw up.
Richard, the NFL draft is a big deal. The NBA draft is a big deal. The MLB draft, it kind of lacks some pizzazz, and it's on the MLB network, and not a lot of people have that or know where it is. And the first round last night took 4 hours, and sometimes the best players, the first round talent, aren't necessarily picked in the first round because of signability. What can be fixed or what can be altered, do you think, with the Major League Baseball draft to make it a more prominent event?
Yeah, well, signability has become much less thing because it's basically a slotted system. Every player knows what he's going to get now. There's not usually too much debate. What happens sometimes if a kid, like Mark Appel last year, he was the number one player, I think, on most teams' boards, but he slid to 8. And so it came, Mark, you want to play for half the the money that the slotting system says you're worth. As far as making it as big as the NBA draft and the NFL draft, that's not going to happen because it's fundamentally a different sport. The Astros took Carlos Correa last year. He was 17 or 18 at the time. And they're hoping in a perfect world, it will be at 2 years, 3 years before he's in the big leagues. So you just don't know. You're saying, oh, let's get fired up about this guy. Oh, yeah, see you in 3 years. So it's just different, and you're taking 50 guys, and you're hoping to find 2 or 3 in each draft. It's exciting. And, I do think if you look at the best teams in baseball now, the organizations that do things right, and I would include the Yankees in that, but you would begin with the Rangers, the Cardinals, the A's, the Rays. And what's their philosophy? Their philosophy is we're not going to go crazy on big contracts. In the case of the Rays and the A's, they really don't have the money. The Rangers and Cardinals do, and choose not to do it. And we're going to hold on to our prospects. We're going to emphasize the draft. Brian Cashman has told his people with the Yankees, draft day's got to be our most important day of the year. This is how this is the lifeblood of our franchise. So it's how you do it, and it's how the smart teams do. Jeff Luhnow is the general manager of the Houston Astros because of his phenomenal record of drafting with the Cardinals. All those guys that has kept the organization going, with La Russa leaving, with Pujols leaving, with Carpenter getting hurt, etc. And that's because you draft well and you draft smartly.
Richard, there's so many things we can hit you with, but we don't want to be greedy with your time. We really appreciate your time this morning. Have a great weekend. Hopefully we'll catch up with you again soon.
Okay, same to you guys. Appreciate you having me.
That is Richard Justice. Thank you, Richard. That is Richard Justice at Richard Justice on Twitter. You can find his work at MLB.com.